are the 4 viruses that cause the common cold. That was until 2002. Then we got a big surprise. And the surprise was, next, is that we had the severe acute respiratory syndrome. And that was SARS. Multiple years later, we got the Middle East respiratory syndrome. But a story that you may remember, next slide. In China, in the Guangdong province, the sort of history repeats itself,
Right.
Mr. President.
Right.
In China, in the Guangdong province, there was this strange disease that came up that nobody knew what it was. The Chinese didn't really tell anybody about it for a few months, November until it got to Hong Kong. When it got to Hong Kong, next slide, in a hotel in Hong Kong, and this was way back in 2003, someone from China went to the hotel, infected a bunch of people, next slide. And this is what you had. You had flights going. At the time, we didn't make any restrictions the way you did, which I think saved us a really lot of hurt. Next slide. And then this is what happened. There were 8,000 cases, 774 deaths. And that's how I get the number that I've been telling you, that the mortality of SARS was about 9.
Well, I haven't been asked to, but I think we're making decisions on certain parts of those countries, as you know. We've already made a decision on parts of Italy, and Japan is very unfortunate because I've seen the incredible job they did on the Olympics. As you know, they're building a facility. It's really finished. It's beautiful. It's finished right on time, as usual with the Japanese. The Prime Minister, a very good friend of mine, and Prime Minister Abe. And so I don't know what they're going to do. They have this magnificent facility, and I don't know what they're going to do, but they'll make the right decision. I know that. But yes, if it was necessary, I would do it. Yes.
What's your timeline on further travel restrictions?
Well, we're looking at different areas, and we'll make that decision with these professionals. We made an early decision based on a little bit of luck, I suspect, but that was the original decision on China itself. And China, in all fairness to them,
The cost, and we've been very clear, it's covered in the private health insurance of every American.
Gentlemen, ladies, can the uninsured get tested?
Scream into the camera, they're going to get you anywhere.
Well, how about answering the question?
We would like an answer.
That's a valid question. Could you answer it?
Well, let's just say this right now in China, I've been told by some people that in China they are saying that this all started in the United States. Well, we know that it did not. But we do know that when it started in China, there was a delay in informing the Chinese and the world as to what was happening. At the same time, the president would say, heck of a job, President Xi. You know, he's making that he was such a great leader, was going to take care of this as soon as the weather warmed up. But I think that part of the problem was lack of notice in a timely, responsible, scientific fashion as to what was existing. Then our exposure to it, we weren't ready in terms of the advisories that were being put forth by the CDC, saying you only test somebody if they just had a trip to China or if they're old and have diabetes or something like that. Well, that was not the appropriate guidance. They had no.
Monday, our USAID announced $37 million in financing allocated for countries affected or at high risk of the Wuhan virus's spread. That comes on top of the $100 million in humanitarian assistance and delivery of more than 17 tons of assistance that the United States has sent to the Chinese people back in January. Turning to China. Last week, we applied a personnel cap on 5 Chinese state-backed propaganda outlets here in the United States. We took this action in service of President Trump's mission to establish greater reciprocity in our relationship with China. We expect Beijing to take a more fair approach towards American and other foreign press inside of China. Where the Chinese Communist Party has imposed increasingly harsh surveillance, harassment, and intimidation on our independent and world-class journalists, we will respond to achieve reciprocity. A free press helps expose corruption and protect the people from cover-ups, as well as help the world understand the CCP's thinking. As I said when I spoke to you last time, censorship can have deadly consequences. We urge the CCP to immediately uphold its commitments to respect freedom of the press. And your last question was about the World Intellectual Property Organization. This wasn't about defeating China. This was about the United States selecting the most capable candidate to deliver on intellectual property rights. We all know the history of China and property rights and intellectual property rights. Right? They've stolen hundreds of billions of dollars of American intellectual property, harming citizens from Kansas to Iowa to Tennessee and Texas, destroying jobs here in the United States of America. The institution that sets the path forward at the UN is the World Intellectual Property Organization. We're very pleased with the outcome from the election yesterday. We think Darren Tong, the candidate from Singapore, will do a fantastic job of creating the standards, the rule of law, the transparency that institution deserves when it's at its best.
Today we're here to talk about the threat we face from Communist China. And let's remember, it's Communist China. We can't forget that. Xi, the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, is a dictator, a human rights violator. We cannot continue to pretend that General Secretary Xi is a world leader intent on pursuing policies of freedom, economic cooperation, and peace. He pursues policies that are good for the Chinese Communist Party, period. He is a despot in disguise. He's Mao Zedong with a makeover. Unfortunately, the last few decades of policies coming out of Washington have not solved the problem of Communist China. For far too long, since President Nixon traveled to Communist China in 1972, the United States has pursued a policy of cooperation and integration. Many were convinced that they showed Communist China and its people of a free market economy, of human rights and individual dignity, of a democratic system that respects the will of the people, that they would naturally move in our direction. It's time for policymakers in Washington to admit that this effort has been a complete failure. Rather than move Communist China in the direction of democratic values, the policy of economic cooperation has simply given Communist China the resources to compete with the United States on a global scale, all while they continue to nationalize industries, steal from U.S. companies, deny basic human rights, violently suppress dissent, and pursue policies of religious oppression. Our posture towards Communist China has simply strengthened a determined adversary. For Beijing, their goal of increasing influence around the world requires the United States and other freedom-loving countries to be weakened. Communist China does not want to join the community of nations so much as it wants to rule it. The result, whether we want to admit it or not, is there is a new Cold War.
My view is that whatever China is providing its people, the last ones who are going to get it are those in these detention camps. So as horrific as the situation must be in China now, it's far worse for those who are in these detention camps, and we have no visibility into it. It speaks volumes of the lack of morality of those leaders. Well, this is unfortunate what totalitarian governments do, and they're more interested, I think, in managing their global image than they are in managing the virus and the crisis that it's created. And I would argue, I'm convinced that we have seen the spread of this internationally faster and broader than it needed to be. Had they been more transparent, had they not pressured countries into not canceling flights. And so not only did this originate in China, but I think it's grown as a result of the actions they've taken, which were designed to protect their image, but came at the expense of public health. Well, I think obviously he is deserving of the prize, and I think if he were to be awarded the prize, it wouldn't just honor the work he's done, but it would call attention to this incredible, tragic situation.
It looks like China has bought the WHO because WHO officials say anything China wants them to say. So China's been issuing statistics showing that new infections are on the downslope. And that it corresponds with what Xi Jinping wants to do, which is to get Chinese workers back to their job sites. Whenever you have statistics support a leader's policies, you've got to be very concerned. we really don't know what's going on inside of China, and I don't even think the WHO knows either. So this is a situation where China has now exercised extreme measures to control the narrative, to control information. So I think the best thing we can say is that we know the virus is continuing. We know that China is trying to prevent foreign investigation of the origin of the virus. And the Chinese government is doing things which are inconsistent with this narrative that the virus is going away.
I think Xi Jinping definitely is risking a second wave of the epidemic coming to China by pushing everybody back to work. But I think he knows that. Why does he still do the push? Is China's economy really that bad?
I think the Chinese economy right now is contracting. When you look at oil demand, it's down 20% year on year. Car sales for the first 16 days of this month were down 92% over the corresponding period last year. Although it's painful, I think that we do need to get our factories out of China. We do need to cut those links, and we do need to disengage. I think that the awareness is there. This coronavirus is a game changer in that sense because it's shown what can happen when we link ourselves to an unstable, dangerous state. We will see an acceleration of the delinkage between the United States and China, and that's a good thing. Nobody really wants to cut our ties with another country, but in this case, it's shown to be absolutely necessary.
想要的